Nice.
So don't miss that one. Let's see, I think we're live. OpenFlip, week 4, professional educator, Wednesday afternoonish time, 12:30, so we could get April in. April's in the middle of a drive home, I think, and so she'll be in and out. So this week we are talking about the last pillar, the P, my favorite pillar, professional educator. And the three reading posts I gave are semi-related. I think you could really kind of go at a lot of different angles on this of what the professional educator is. I kept in Brian's post because Brian's post pointed to Audrey's post on the Hippocratic Oath as it applies to education. And Brian was going through a frustrating week that week when he wrote that blog post. And I really kind of liked the take he had on that. So you can go from that way. The other way we can really think about professional educators, how we keep learning ourselves. So it could be like we're doing right now, where we're connecting via Google Hangout, connecting with other bloggers, other educators. We didn't meet Christine until this course. We didn't meet Benjamin until this course. And so it's a way for a lot of us to reach out. April and I have known each other for a couple of years, but in essence, through this same kind of medium of connecting to other educators. So that's the way I really like to think of it, and that's my passion, and that's what I do. So that's why the P would be my favorite pillar in the Flip 4 pillars. What do you think about this, Christine, before you have to take off for celebrations and?
Yes. Our crab lunch is waiting us soon. But again, yes,
so lucky.
yum. Yes. So a few thoughts on that. I think the networking is so critical to help really just drive the curriculum, drive the needs of the students. But often what happens is we get busy as professionals and we kind of go into a shell and isolate ourselves. So what do you do in your organizations to prevent that from happening?
You want to jump in, April?
Well, yeah. If I lose you guys, I'll come back. But
Yep.
I would say one of the things that we do in our district is that we have time that we carve out of our schedule intentionally for
Good.
our English department to come together and share ideas. We're a very collaborative department. We're very lucky in that aspect. Time and actually becomes part of a lunchroom conversation as well. I think if you can show your vulnerability, that you're open to learning from everyone and sharing everything, then anytime you get together can be an opportunity to to learn and share and to grow. But you have to kind of break that habit of going in, like you said, to that shell, because it's an easy thing to do. You get overwhelmed.
Absolutely. So on that, what is the recommendation? Once a week, bi-weekly, that you have like team meetings?
We have team meetings once a week officially, and then unofficially, like I said, pretty much every lunch hour is an unofficial time.
Right. I would say that kind of official timing, like April's saying, is the once a week is a good yardstick, because if you do it too long, then it just kind of drags out, or a holiday happens that one week, and then then it's every 4 weeks because we missed one, and we do that at our campus. We started that about a year ago, where it was a Friday afternoon, which I'm not happy with the day, but Friday afternoon, like 4 to 5. Where we share tools and things we're doing, but they also incentivize for people to go by giving some credits, hour credit of teacher training towards the number of hours we need to do as teachers at the university or the high school, because we have the high school attached. So that helps a little bit incentivize it by having it worth points, but also giving a pretty open forum for everyone who wants to say, hey, I'd like to share using Kahoot next week, or this other or Google Classrooms, or whatever the thing I'm excited about and I learned about last week from someone else. I'd like to share it with my smaller community on campus. I think those are important events as well.
It does open us up to be a risk taker, though, and I will say some people are more adept or more easy to get into that kind of environment, and some people aren't in it.
Yeah. and we might lose April here as she goes through a mountain pass.
Meet once a week.
Like lunches.
The topics are.
Oh, keep going, April. You came back.
I think I was just saying that it's loosely structured. When you have these meetings, if somebody has a need to talk about how Kahoot is working or not working in the classroom, that's the topic you go on. If somebody else wants to discuss assessment and how do you stay on top of it in the classroom, the dialogue is open.
Right. There's a balance there, Christine, because some people, if you just say it's totally open, there's people like me that love it. But then other people are like, well, I don't know what they're going to talk about, so I don't know if I want to go, so they won't go.
Gotcha.
So maybe you got to balance both types of audience and have, say, one kind of scheduled thing and then the rest of it kind of open.
Okay.
I know it depends on community. On my campus, the open thing freaks people out. Mm-hmm. They want to know what's going to happen. They want it scheduled. That's why it's really hard for me to organize an ed camp there. It just blows their minds at this idea of we don't know what's going to be presented until we're actually there.
Okay, good point.
So it really depends on your community and your context there. I found in here in Mexico and Guadalajara, people want to know what it's going to be about. And they definitely want to get credit for the hours or else they won't go.
Right, there has to be some ROI for them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Benjamin, you're back after helping a student there. Your thoughts on how to incentivize and create a culture of professional learning?
Yeah, and sorry, I missed the initial question, but tell me if I'm addressing this or not. But yeah, I agree that I like the idea of starting with the bottom-up discussions based on what the teachers are wanting to talk about, maybe some challenges that they're facing. But I think that if we, as the facilitator, leader, or however you want to define our role, maybe our role is to guide those conversations into maybe a larger vision or maybe a group or institutional objective that we're working towards. I find that that's beneficial. So again, maybe starting with the ground up discussions about the problems that we're facing day to day on a day-to-day basis, but then maybe frame those into a larger institutional goal. I think might be an approach, so that so that there is the perception that the teachers see kind of their role and what they're doing in the grand scheme of things as far as the institutional goals. I think it's kind of a relationship between those two, kind of meeting, working towards goals, mission, vision statements, and also individual personal goals at the teacher level.
Right. Go ahead, Christine. That's cool. Have a great lunch.
Okay, I'll see you maybe tomorrow night. Yeah.
Excellent. Tomorrow night it looks like we should have Aaron Sams joining us, so don't miss tomorrow evening. Anyone who can join. The regular 8 p.m. my time, which is 9 p.m. Eastern.
Thank you. Okay.
And then Christine, I'll see you Saturday.
Yes, Saturday for another lunch. Dinner.
Yes. Dinner, pool and dinner. Woohoo!
Pool and dinner. Okay. Ciao.
Love it.
Thank you for everything. Bye, Ken.
Cheers.
We'll invite you next time.
All right.
That's right.
Awesome. So it's interesting because this whole conversation about whether PD or professional development should be in the hands of the educator or the hands of the institution and what's the balance, this comes up probably at least every few months on EdChat, on EdChat Radio or the EdChat conversations. And I actually tried to hook Jason Bretzman into the conversation this week, but he was busy today because that's his big thing. If you haven't run into Jason Bretzman and his flipping professional development stuff, Benjamin, you should definitely check it out. He runs this kind of what he calls patio PD, patio professional development, where people just get together at people's houses and chat and kind of make it a social environment after you guys were talking about lunch on Saturday. And there's actually an event on July 14th, World Patio PD Day. And so I'm going to see if I can get some people here together in town and run a group here. So Jason couldn't make it though. Back to who should really be responsible. So where is there a 50-50 split there, you think, Benjamin, or should it be all on the teacher, or should it be all on the institution to run their professional development and develop ourselves?
Personally, I think we have, as individuals, as teachers, a responsibility, right, to learn as much as we can and really seek out opportunities to learn. And with technologies the way they are today, we really have little excuse to not do that. So I think that I see a personal responsibility at our level, at the individual level, really to learn as much as we can based on the challenges that we face. But looking at it at the institutional level or the school level or district level or departmental level, there also is a responsibility to share. Share with our colleagues here at our own institution. Again, I feel like that's an individual responsibility. Now, looking at it from a leadership standpoint, of course, there's also that, again, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, is the way to kind of leverage and bring together those learning experiences that teachers really have responsibility to partake and bring those together and make sense at an institutional level. And I think, again, just by sharing these experiences, whether each person is pursuing his or her own learning trajectory, or there's some commonality between that, but that there's more transparency between how we as a group are learning. And I think that that's only to our benefit, our benefit at the individual level and, of course, the institutional level. So, I look at it from really two perspectives: individual responsibility versus in a leadership role, or even us as individual leaders, regardless of our position, we have, an opportunity to share and bring these experiences to others. I'll finish by saying that, I've had discussions with other teachers that I meet online, and it's interesting to know that a lot of times we have more contact, at least I can speak for myself, I have a lot more contact with other educators online than many of the educators that I see face-to-face every day. That may be, in an office right in front of me. And, there's certain reasons for that, and I'm not saying that that's necessarily good or bad, but it seems to be a reality. And so I think it's just really, finding ways that we can interact within the same institution so that, again, we can learn more from each other and we're not learning, just as we don't like to really teach in isolation. I think that it's also beneficial to not learn in isolation, that it just becomes more transparent. So that would be my take on it.
That's a great take on it, Benjamin. I think the problem is whenever we ask these questions, we're speaking to a select group. The ones that aren't really interested in pushing their own learning aren't going to be here answering that question. They're the ones that are expecting, I don't know about how to do X because I haven't been offered a course on X yet in the last 2 years, which I see as well. So I think you're definitely nailing it. That there's a personal responsibility that we this is a profession, and we need to keep our skills up, keep our knowledge up, keep our network up, and even from a selfish perspective, that's important too, because if you lose your position at the place you're working at now, this network that you've created through online professional development or in-person professional development, you've got your contact list up, and that next job is going to be right around the corner. There's that point of view to it as well. But I do think it's important for administrators to decide which way we're steering this big ship. And part of that means offering, say, certain core training that they want everyone to at least know about, so that they're in the right direction, but also giving us flexibility to go and tackle things the way we want to tackle them. You're still there, April, so let you jump in.
Yeah, no, I was just going to agree that I know that I think his name is Ben Wyckoff, I think, in Denver Public Schools. He's really moving. His big movement is that if you are going to have personalized learning for your students, why in the heck are we not doing it for our teachers?
Exactly.
Which is, a good point. And to play devil's advocate, though, I mean, you're right. There's some of us that are going to be out there, constantly being on the cutting edge and searching out connections. And then there's some people that are going to sit on their butts and want it, spoon-fed to them, just like our students are the exact same way.
Yeah.
And there is an element professional.
And I go ahead, Benj. No, you go ahead, Benjamin.
Well, I was just going to add, yeah, I totally agree. I think as leadership, and when I talk about being a leader, now I'm thinking more in terms of, you know, someone who's in charge, a supervisor who has this role, this responsibility, that they, just like we do as in our classroom, sometimes supervisors are going to take a didactic role, sometimes they're going to take a facilitative role, sometimes they're going to take a coaching role. I mean, their roles are going to vary depending on the context, the situation, and the teacher, and they need to recognize when to assume the right role based on the right situation or the right moment, so not to turn off teachers to this idea of professional development, to try to create these opportunities and then try to assume the appropriate role, which is not always easy, but to assume the right role at the given moment in a way that motivates teachers to really take advantage of the opportunities. So it's one thing to present the opportunities and make them available, and another is to kind of facilitate and help and assist those teachers to take advantage of those opportunities in a lot of ways as they see fit. I mean, of course, there are certain institutional goals, like I mentioned, but you know, a lot of it's just starting, you know, getting the ball started here, just having them pursue some sort of professional development, right, and then later kind of leverage bringing that together into the institutional vision.
Yeah, it's always difficult for the teacher to decide, and a lot of times it comes back to points and what's being measured as my performance as an educator. And when I was actually doing my review right now at our year-end review the other week, I was listing out all the things that I do, because I tend not to take the courses that are offered because I've been there for 20-something years and they keep offering the same courses and there's nothing new that I want to take. And my boss, my department chair, said, well, you do a lot of reading, right? Why don't you put a list of all the books you've read? And I got, oh, well, I could just list a huge list of books, and that doesn't even get into blog posts and other formats that I'm reading or papers online to show that. For me, I wouldn't even list that on my advancement for the year, because to me that just seems like everybody's doing this, right? And the answer probably is that no, not really. So we got to find ways to incentivize and encourage this to happen, but also give the teachers some space to use that as their own professional development. Go ahead, April. Mountain Pass. She's roboting. Most of that was roboted. I don't think you heard that either, Benjamin, did you?
No, I didn't quite catch that.
I'll see if I get April in when she's in a good pass. We'll see what that topic was about. I just really. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead, Ken.
I
was just going to add that I think a lot of it's just this culture, again, going back to sharing. I mean, how comfortable are we making our learning transparent? Because if I'm one that feels threatened to show that maybe I don't know something, or that I had a bad class and I'm trying to understand something that maybe I should know, then that puts me in a vulnerable position, and maybe I don't want to be put in that vulnerable position. So it's a cultural thing in the sense that, you know, that there's a continual process of working together, and this kind of leads to your point, Ken, about how we're being assessed. Because if I know that I'm being assessed by, you know, it depends on what I'm doing in class, and if I say that I don't know something, or if I share something that you know, a bad class or something, that might be reflected in my evaluation, and then what are the ramifications of that? So it's really, I think it does lead a lot to how teachers are evaluated, and that looking at it from a formative assessment standpoint, that supervisors are prepared to provide as much formative assessment, just as we would in our own classes, to our teachers, so that they are learning and not so much being evaluated, making that distinction between learning and evaluation.
And having someone come and visit our class and check out what we're doing should be the normal. Recently, I heard of a teacher basically just passed out when they came to watch her class, and because she was all stressed out about it, and it shouldn't be that type of environment. I really like your point, Benjamin, about how this idea of sharing, and I'm not used to sharing, and I'm going to feel bad about what if someone thinks what I'm sharing is not great. And here's the big reflection. Our students are doing that almost every day in our classroom when we're asking them, hey, Billy, what do you think about, maybe Billy's not ready to share. And so there's a lot of reflection in what we're doing here as learners. And I think that's what's really important for us, to put ourselves in the shoes of being learners, to empathize with what's going on in our students' head. And we're like 40-something, I guess, or something, and put ourselves in the shoes of an 18 or a 17 or a 16, and the whole body image and self, awareness that's going to deal with their emotions at that point in time. And we really need to think about that a lot more, I think.
Yeah, and imagine you're sharing an experience also. Forget about your colleagues, your own students. Look at a blog post where you say, well, I didn't know what happened this day, and you're actually reflecting on maybe a challenging moment, and your students are seeing that. How does that also reflect on you as a teacher? And
right. And I think it takes a while for some people to come out of their shell. I've seen in this course various semesters. It's opened up a lot of, the flowers bloomed and people just really got this, and it worked with them. And some people it doesn't. And I think that's just the way this type of open learning works. There's 100 and something. No, there were 61 people who are on the mailing list for this course right now, but there's not that many active. But that's fine, because some of them might just be coming in and looking at the blogs and might be getting a lot from that, or watching this recording. We have 2 viewers now. I have no idea who's viewing. Back to 1. But I don't know. I'd love to know if people are getting something out of the courses like this by just watching what's going on. Because I know I do. I'll look back on a Jim Groom video with Alan Levine or Audrey Waters or someone that had done something last year or the year before, and I'll sit back and I'll watch it for an hour, and I'll get something out of that, even though I wasn't actively in the course and I'm getting credit.
Right, and another point is you're actually leaving an audit trail, a footprint of all of these experiences and prior courses that you've offered, you and April have offered, and the benefit is not only in the moment of these 3 or 4 or 5 weeks that you're offering the course. Obviously, the benefit extends beyond. And it's interesting to really try to reconcile informal learning, which I would consider this being an example of, versus formal learning within the context of a course with a syllabus, and really trying to bring those together. Not to say, of course, they're different in certain aspects, but as we're seeing through MOOCs, that we're seeing kind of an emergence of these 2 very different ways of learning, and I think for the benefit of both those who are taking the course for credit versus the general public who just wants to learn something at their however they wish to learn. So it's interesting.
It's fun. I'd like to know, because I write letters and give people, my little letter saying I think you should get 30 hours of credit for this course type thing. I'm curious to hear back from those people if it was difficult to do, right? If it becomes more flexible, because I can see where the administrative staff are thinking, well, we can't just give away, hours of credit without justifying it or having some measurement that's really easy to measure, because it tends to get down to the minimal of not trusting people, so we can't allow this flexibility because someone's going to abuse the flexibility. And I think that tends to be the resistance. So I'm curious from people that I've given the letters to whether it was easy for them to do it. They took the letter and they went, and the person at admin or whatever said, oh, wow, I've never seen something like this before. Sure, I can give you 30 hours.
Right.
Or even, like you said, there's a record here, Benjamin. I mean, if you had to write down, I participated in all of these Hangouts, you could actually point to the URL and say, look, there's my head. I'm talking there. You don't have to watch it all half an hour, but you could fast forward through and go say, yeah, Benjamin was there for the half hour. Cool, give him his credit. there's evidence.
That would be a question that I would be asking. How important is just the certificate versus actually them looking at that audit trail and seeing the products that the person actually did? April, I don't know if you have your connection.
I'm here. I'm in and out. I'm stopping to get gas, but our district controls what we can and cannot do. They have the final say, and they have not been historically very good at acknowledging formative learning, where there isn't like attendance taken, and things like that.
Yeah, it's tricky, and I think people need to really start opening to that. Because like Benjamin was saying, we're trying to do this style of learning with our students,
right?
But we don't know how to do it to ourselves, or the assessment of us as teacher staff should be aligned with the way we're trying to change the way we're evaluating our students. We have a push of the tech called Tech 21, and we have our big meeting next week with all of the faculty that are full-time faculty. And that's the thing I'm going to be pushing is we should be doing the same thing with teachers as we want to do with our students.
I think one aspect. Go ahead, April.
Go ahead, sorry. I was going to say, they want to treat us like professionals, which they say we're professionals, but I can speak from that sometimes you really don't feel like a professional.
Right. It's measuring what's easy to measure, and I see that a lot in people applying flipped classroom and still using a very, very traditional way of grading. I was reading actually Robert Talbert's post, which is linked this week. I think I followed the trail down to his previous post where he was describing his evaluation metrics for his course that semester. And it looked like something I remember when I was an undergrad, and my professor had the most complex system for grading us at all possible. And I love the guy. I still talk to Bjorn often. But it seemed like he was going way, way too detail-oriented of saying exactly what needed to be done, that it ended up not leaving flexibility. I'm reading more recent posts from Robert. He kind of acknowledges that he dialed too much into it. So there's always that. We tend to measure what's easy to measure.
Right.
Which is sad.
Yeah. And I think it just boils down to accountability. Two different things. One is just getting accredited for taking a course and what that implies versus actually learning and the evaluation process. I kind of look at those slightly different, although they're all related. But I think it boils down to accountability and how we account for accountability. That is, what do we count for evidence, and how does that affect, at the end of the day, what we're doing in the classroom with our students, and what's the relationship between our learning versus what's happening in the class altogether. So it is. I think it's a complex endeavor.
It's hard.
But I do see that over time that these forms of informal learning are going to be more acceptable in the future. However, whatever that looks like. But I think it seems to be, if there is an answer, that it's going to be somehow reflected in the way that we are defining accountability.
Yeah, and that's why I brought around this concept of writing a letter, just a one-page email and a certificate of achievement for this type of course, because even if we sit down with our boss and try to explain this cool thing I did, and I spent 40 hours on this course, and they don't have 5 minutes listening to the conversation, they just show me the certificate, right? And it seems we devolve into checkbox heroes, which is sad, because when a teacher gets really excited about some learning process they went through, it's a personal experience, and if we just devolve down to how many hours of credit you get, it's kind of sad but necessary.
Well, I could see where in the future we have, every teacher has their own portfolio. Mm-hmm. And within that portfolio, it's broken down very clearly the area of, professional development and having corresponding links and videos and whatever products are associated with that particular portfolio, and presenting that in a way that could provide evidence of one's learning. So, I don't think it's that complicated, but of course it's just coming together and having the administrators recognizing that as a valid form of professional development.
And their portfolio being kind of a CV with links. I mean, I could easily generate badges that are signed by me with a URL that you could say, hey, just put this URL into your CV, and it can image or something, and someone can verify that it really was you attached to this email address, which received the credit for this course and signed by me digitally, so that you can't fake it type thing. But there's way to go through these. If people want to look at badges and open badges, and they should definitely go down that path. I think that's an interesting avenue to explore. I know Amy Burval's talked about that. Alan Levine's written a lot about badges. That's fun stuff.
I'm curious, April, and maybe you mentioned this and I missed it, but I'm curious about the process of those who evaluate or give credit to professional development courses versus the actual supervisors of those teachers who also make value judgments in what the teacher is or is not doing in class. Are those two different departments or areas, or
yes,
is the same?
Two entirely different departments. One is our centralized HR benefits, whatever, and the other one is my supervisor in the building. So no, the two don't communicate.
Okay, do you see that some sort of benefit or answer into all of this would be that they would have better communication between the supervisor and the administrators who are granting the credit, or is that like an impossible task?
I think that if our central office were to give that power to the administrators, it's easier for them. But to keep it standardized, they feel it has to go, and legit, they feel it has to go through one centralized location.
What do you think the rationale is for having that standard?
Oh, because they want to make sure that when someone says they have this much, this many CEUs, or we go up for recertification for the state or whatever it happens to be, and it's given within D20.
Nope. Lost April.
We lost her. We lost her at D20. I was thinking Dungeons and Dragons and 20-sided dice, but that shows my geekness.
Are you rolling dice?
I'm rolling a save.
April's number didn't come up, so she's cut.
Stabbed in the back.
I think I know where she was going, though. It seems like it just seems, and maybe
I think that
the district
seems like covering their asses. Like, we don't want to get audited, and then they come down and they're going, "Where? How are you justifying this and that and this?" I think I just brought up Billy Joel's YouTube video of A Matter of Trust, and I was going to put that in the background because a lot of this comes down to how much trust do we have in what our educators are doing, and that's key. And I'm struggling that a lot with my evaluation of my students, that I want to be able to just trust them.
Right.
And other teachers looking at me and going, "You're nuts! You can't trust them." And well, I hope I can, and I hope my administrative staff can trust us as well.
Yeah.
Social situation in a completely based on mistrust, then that's a dark road to go down. And I think that's where we're going down a lot of times, because we just can't trust. We believe we're both foreigners living here in Mexico, so we're used to reflecting on that a lot, Benjamin.
Yeah, I mean, it's you mentioned earlier about elsewhere relate to that. I like to do that as well. Although we do have some good courses here that they offer. I've participated in several MOOCs that I have fortunately gotten credit for doing those. But I think it's just important to first kind of see, and we talked about this in an earlier video. I remember April mentioning, talking about this, that it's important to seek out first, discuss with the administrators first to see, does this or would this type of online learning experience, could I get credit for doing this? And having that discussion before you actually just take the course and then just hope that that they accept it. But it just seems to me that there needs to be communication and the administrators who are actually giving credit for these courses, because it seems like again, going back to accountability, that these courses needs to have some sort of impact in the classroom. And really the best, person to really make that distinction would be not only the teachers themselves, but the supervisor, the group there who are working very closely, hopefully together, management
and the students. And the students. I think a lot of this, it comes around to what I've mentioned before, and I don't think I mentioned this time, is us being a good model of behavior of learning to our students and modeling that. And I'll post stuff to my educator friends here on Twitter, and I'll get likes or retweets from my students, and it kind of blows me away, but they are watching what we're doing, and they're learning. It might not be direct about the course with me today, that learning really is a lifelong thing. We keep telling them that, but without modeling it, they're not going to get it.
Absolutely, yeah. And I try to share, my challenges that I face, things that I'm not sure about. I try to share them with my students as well. Since my students are also either pre-service or some are in-service teachers, I feel that they can benefit also from the challenges that I face and learn even from my mistakes that I make. And, again, just extending this transparency of learning to my students, I think is a good thing overall.
And one thing I was going to mention too before we sign off, we're getting on time, but in defense of those classes that they do offer on my campus, I do take them often, and sometimes it's like they need people in the seats because they have invited speakers and we don't have an empty class. And then I go to those and I realize one thing that's really, really important for me when I go to those classes on my campus, and you kind of hinted to this, is I meet a whole bunch of people that I don't know. And they're actually on my campus. They might be just down the hallway. And all of a sudden I become exposed, and they become exposed to these people that are right there under my nose, and we haven't talked about things. Or it might be a colleague I haven't talked to in a few years. So I think those in-person courses really are important. I just like it when they're not so specific. It's not, Blackboard 101, how to use the forums, or something really generic like that. Maybe something more philosophical that will touch the areas that it'll get more of a cross culture. I'll see the people in the arts in the same courses as the people in engineering. So I love those type of courses, and that's the main reason I like to sign up for courses on my campus, is to meet people, because learning is social.
Exactly, and even when you're in MOOCs, and I agree completely what you're saying with the face-to-face courses, the MOOC, sometimes it's less important about what you're actually learning in the course, and really more important, the connections you're making, and also reflecting on your learning process and how you are adapting to that learning process. I'm thinking the first time I took a MOOC, it was all reflection, it was all kind of metacognitive processes for me, thinking about how do I learn in this environment, with whom am I interacting, and that was really what I learned from that first MOOC. I don't even remember the content. It wasn't nearly as important, the speakers. It was more about the people that I found in different blogs and those relationships, and just reflecting on what was working for me and what wasn't working for me within that type of online environment. So yeah, it's I see it.
Have you been reading the George Couros book yet? The Innovator's Mindset? Okay, I was just
and
he's talking about so it's Innovator's Mindset, George Couros. You definitely want to read this if you haven't read it. People.
I'm sorry. Yes. I'm sorry. Yes.
I know I think you purchased it, and George liked your mention about it. I've been mentioning his course or his book a lot, and just this chapter I was reading, it talked about they got kind of key teachers who volunteered from different schools at a district-wide level. This is in the Edmonton area, and so they wanted at least one from each school, and schools could send more if they were going to throw in some budget for it. But he talked about the fact that we couldn't really get really specific on tools because it was K to high school. And the real concept of getting these teachers together was to get them to communicate about the learning process and about the pedagogical thoughts. And a lot of it is to do is to get them talking to each other and sharing. And that's so key. And we're not used to sharing this way. So if you can get a bunch of new teachers that don't know each other in a room and throw them together and put some catalyst in there to get them to talk and share, that's probably the biggest win of all of that type of environment. And I definitely agree with that. For me, that's what conferences are about. It's not about what this talk is about. It's about the conversations in the hallways. And a lot of us are following those from afar right now as ISTE comments fill up our Twitter feeds.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I misunderstood you earlier. Yeah, I have started the book. I'm about halfway finished, and I am enjoying the book very much. I highly recommend it. Getting a lot of insight about really him unpacking the term innovation, and because that seems to be the underlying theme, what's new and what's, what's new to the environment. And I think that, yeah, and this kind of leads back to the beginning of our conversation about really thinking about professional development, even within an institution, is not only creating those environments, but just having teachers share and discuss. And even though we feel that we might have relationships with our colleagues that we see face to face, I think if those learning experiences are not transparent, I still think there's room for learning about our colleagues and more so about how they learn. I mean, we may know them, in one situation, but until we really start sharing and seeing how we each learn, do we really, I think, know the other person. And I feel that there's just always a learning opportunity when we can share and have that level of openness to professional development.
And I think we start talking about pedagogy then, because usually in the lunchroom conversations, it's about, staff benefits or the parking lot's a mess or all of the kind of just day-to-day stuff is what the topics tend to be over lunch, and not getting deep into pedagogy or what's happening in my class. So I think we need to be thrown into a different environment for that to happen. So then that's
absolutely.
why we do. And we're forcing that environment right now between me and you, because we have a context of why we're having a conversation. We're not talking about the traffic on the way to school today, because it's not relevant to our context right now. I'm at home, so there was none.
Right. I think that it's important, these informal pedagogical dialogues, having these informal pedagogical dialogues really drive the discussion, and not having, we can have, a topic that main topic that brings us together initially, but it's really about where this conversation takes us, and not having it so derived over maybe a particular concept, but that I think that's when people are more open to discuss different aspects, is when you can kind of keep it open and flexible enough that teachers feel confident enough to discuss different challenges. So yeah, I think that's a healthy approach.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining, Benjamin. I'm going to wrap up here because I got to start getting ready for picking up my kids who are still in school till tomorrow. And so I'll thank everyone who's watching. We had 2 or 3 viewers. I think we were up to 4 there for a bit, and we probably have people watching later. This is the OpenFlip afternoon edition. We're on week 4 at the end pretty well. There's nothing formal after this, but what I always ask people to do next week is kind of reflect on what they went through these 4 or 5 weeks and what's next, kind of a wrap-up type blog post. Tomorrow evening, we should have, April should be at home and not driving in her car, and a better connection. And Aaron Sam should be there with her after ISTE, and he can talk to us about what he saw at ISTE, or share his wisdom as one of the kind of co-founders of the Flip movement between him and John Bergman. And so Aaron will be with us tomorrow evening, 8 p.m. my time, which is 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Thanks everyone for listening, and have a great week.